A couple of mornings ago, I woke up to a recurring nightmare that I have been having for many, many years. It's one that I haven't exactly figured out. I don't know exactly what it means. I have some ideas, but it got me thinking about the subject of recurring dreams, recurring nightmares. And as I was thinking about it and reflecting on recurring dreams and recurring nightmares, I realized there's a few that I've had in my life that I actually solved, that actually did go away and I never had again. And a few of them I had for many, many years. So I would like to talk about this subject and see what sense I can make of it. So let me start with a simple recurring nightmare that I had for about 5 years. I had it from the age of about 17 to 22. And the reason I say it was simple is basically it was caused by something that happened to me. And an event, a specific event. Now, there was probably a context that happened in my life that set me up to be so affected by this one event, but it was really this one pinpointed event that got it started. It happened when I was 17 years old in my high school band. I'd been in the band in my school for whatever it was, 7 years, 8 years, something like that. And I'd been in my high school band for 3 years. Well, my senior year of high school, right at the beginning, I realized I didn't want to be in the band anymore. I was really busy with a lot of other stuff in my life. I was really into my academics, I was into sports, and the band just wasn't doing it for me. So I went to the leader of the band, and I sat down with him in his office, and I explained to him my reasons why I was quitting, and I told him I was sorry, and I really was hoping he would be kind about it and he would still love me because I really wanted him to love me. In a lot of ways, I was still a very needy, hurt child who needed a father figure to care about me and respect me, and to respect my decision. Well, he didn't. He became very angry at me. He was really upset and disrespectful, and he didn't accept my no as an answer. He didn't accept my autonomy. He basically didn't accept my right to quit. And he gave me a lecture about how quitters are people who end up quitting everything in their life, how I was giving up on the band, and how the band needed me, and how I'd made a commitment and that I was breaking my commitment, which really wasn't true. I just had kind of come into the band arbitrarily. I mean, I was in the middle school band and I just kind of arbitrarily continued in it. I never said, I want to continue being in the band. I just did what was expected of me. But anyways, I listened to all his reasons and I felt really, really guilty because he was putting a lot of guilt on me. But I also said, yeah, but I am quitting and I need to do this. And I'd already made my mind up. So in a way, I was just being polite by telling him. I didn't actually really even need to tell him. But so I quit. And what happened was his response to me quitting was he gave me the silent treatment for the whole rest of my senior year of high school. And the other people in the band followed his lead. Lots and lots of them. A lot of the popular kids in the band just ignored me. And when I was walking through the halls of my school, I would see this band director. I'd see him all the time, 3, 4, 5 times a week. And in the past, he'd always be like, hi, hi. He'd always be happy to see me and ask me how I was doing. Now, suddenly, he'd walk by me and I'd be coming and I'd look at him, wanting to connect with him, at least wanting him to say hi and be nice to me like he'd always done. And instead, I became a non-person. He wasn't even focusing on me. And the thing is, he knew I was there. He just was ignoring me and I was being punished. And for me, what happened is I really was not able to handle it emotionally. It was a terribly painful rejection because I really had looked up to him a lot over those 3 years of being in the band. And I suffered for it. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I had nobody to talk about it with. The only other people who knew him in my life were the other people in the band, and they all sided with him. Couldn't talk about it with my parents. They were actually kind of like him in a lot of ways. So basically, I suffered alone in silence. And what happened is because it was so painful for me, it started coming out in my dreams. And I started having dreams over and over and over again that I would interact with him, I'd try to talk with him, he'd ignore me, he'd reject me, I'd cry, I'd get upset, I'd be angry, I'd scream at him sometimes, and nothing helped. over and over again. I would have these dreams and I'd wake up in a sweat sometimes. I'd wake up feeling despairing a lot of times. I'd wake up feeling so hurt. I'd wake up angry, all sorts of different feelings around this, because clearly I had a lot of feelings around the rejection I felt from him, the emotional rejection. But I really didn't know how to deal with it, and it went on for years. Now, I went away to college, didn't see him again. I saw him my whole senior year, but after I left for college, I didn't see him for 4 years. Well, when I finished college, I came home for a very, very short while, and I thought, I'm still having dreams about this guy. And something in me was getting more mature, and I said, I'm going to face him. I'm going to go have a talk with him. So I went into the band room, and he was there, and I saw him, and it was like my heart was beating fast. I was terrified. And he saw me, and he walked up. He goes, "Daniel." And he walked up, and he shook my hand. He says, "Great to have you back. Oh, I love it when old band alumni come back." And I looked at him, and he treated me totally different than how he'd treated me 4 years earlier, 5 years earlier. And I realized that he had actually forgotten that I'd quit the band. He'd just moved on, and he had punished me for that whole year, and yet had forgotten it. So we talked for a little bit, and I was now playing guitar, so I played him a couple of songs on the guitar, and I met some of the new band members, and then I asked if I could talk with him alone in his office. And he said, "Sure." So we went, and we sat down in his office, and I said, "I would like to tell you something that happened 4 and 5 years ago." He said, "Sure, what happened?" But he had a slight look in his eyes, like he was a little suspicious, like, why is he telling me this? And I told him the story that I just told you about how I needed to move on with my life, how I'd quit, how I'd needed his approval. He was a father figure. He was someone who I really respected, and how he had treated me abysmally, how he had treated me basically in a very immature, childlike way, and that he had misused his power as an adult who could guide children. And I was a child. I wasn't an adult yet. Even though I was getting taller and growing up, I was still a little boy emotionally in so many ways. And I told him how he had hurt me and how painful it was, and how I'd actually been dreaming about him for the last 5 years, and recurring dreams that were horrible, and how I'd had sadness and anger and feelings of abandonment and rejection. And he just sat there and he looked at me. I don't think anyone had ever told him this. And I told him how he had abused his power, and how his abuse of power had harmed a boy who was in a very hurt place in his life, and actually needed not necessarily love, but at the minimum just respect, and how I hadn't gotten that from him. And for what? Just because I needed to move on with my life. Not that I'd even done anything particularly bad. And he just sat there, and he listened, and then he looked at me and he said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for having done that." He said, I didn't realize. And I said, "I accept it. I do accept your apology." But I said, "But I accept it with one caveat." And he gave me a look like he didn't know what I was going to do or say. And I said, "I'll accept your apology if I can feel confident that you're never going to do that to any other children again, that you don't abuse your power and authority, because I know there's other kids who wanted to quit the band and did quit the band, and I think children have a right to move on with their lives if that's what they want, and it's not any adult's place to manipulate them and to use your power as the leader of a very important organization to hurt them, to manipulate them, to pressure them. And if they do make their decision, not to take it out on them with punishment. That's an inappropriate way to behave as an adult." And he just looked at me like this and nodded. And I said, "So I will accept your apology as long as I can feel confident that you're not going to harm other kids again." And he just said, "Thank you for telling me that." Now, do I believe him? Did he never do that again? I'm really not sure, because I know he had a really sadistic streak in his personality. So for all I know, he probably did do it again. But I bet he thought about it. What I said went into him, because we probably sat there for 20 minutes and talked, and it wasn't like I let him off the hook so easily. But what I found is, after that, I went home and I went traveling and I was free and I moved on with my life, and I really transitioned into adulthood a lot more. But I never, ever had another recurring nightmare about him again. they were done. So that was the first recurring nightmare. A simple, really bad thing that happened to me. Not extremely bad. Much worse things happen to people all the time. I've heard stories that are 10 times worse than that and repeated. That was just a one incident thing that I was vulnerable in certain ways because of my own childhood trauma. But that incident, boom, it led me to really be harmed in a way that carried on for 5 full years. So that was the first one. The second recurring dream that I had, recurring nightmare that I had, started, I remember it probably when I was about 10 or 11 years old. We moved to a new house, my family did, and I had a bedroom that was separated from the rest of my family, and it was near a street. It was near a road where we lived. I could hear cars going by all the time. Sometimes I could even hear people walking by outside. And what I started having is recurring nightmares that someone was breaking through my window into my bedroom and going to harm me. And in my dreams, it was men who were breaking into my bedroom. And they were violent and they wanted to kill me. And I had that over and over and over again for many, many years, all through my childhood. I even had it when I would come back from college and stay in my family home. And I pretty much only had it when I was in my family home in my bedroom. And I was like, what is this? I really didn't know. But at the time when I was a kid, I had a very concrete way of thinking, and I think mostly children are like that. They're not analyzing themselves in symbolic ways. So for me, what I thought is, very simply, I really was scared that there were people out there who were dangerous, who were going to break in and harm me or kill me. And I lived with that fear at night over and over. I probably had that dream hundreds of times. Sometimes I would wake up screaming even. I would wake up in cold sweats. Sometimes I would have trouble falling asleep. Or after dreams like that, I would have trouble going back to sleep. It was really terrifying. Now, I solved that dream. And the way that I solved that dream was different from how I solved the first dream. And interestingly, the way that I solved that dream happened pretty passively because I really didn't have anybody to confront. I remember trying to learn martial arts kind of techniques for fighting people off, and I even had a gun when I was a kid because where I grew up upstate, you could buy guns at 16 years old. So I actually had a shotgun. Before that, I had a BB gun, and I was always thinking if somebody breaks in, I'll shoot them, things like that. And those things, by the way, did nothing to really help quell my fears that were coming up through my dream. Now, when I got my first big clue that I really actually wasn't afraid of people breaking in from the outside and harming me, that it was actually something else, that this dream was symbolic for a totally different fear. The big clue that I had was when I was 20 years old and I started hitchhiking. And I started hitchhiking in Yellowstone National Park. And I hitchhiked through Montana and through Wyoming and through Idaho. I had a tent, but sometimes I didn't even put up the tent. Sometimes I was sleeping out under the stars or sleeping out in the forest, and there were wild animals there. There were buffalo around. I'd see them during the day. I knew there were grizzly bears around. There were black bears too. I think there were even pumas, and there were people. There were people around who were dangerous, who could find me. And I was hitchhiking. But the main thing that I realized is at night when I was sleeping, I wasn't afraid. I didn't have these dreams. And I thought, wait a second. If you're really so scared of being harmed by people, by dangerous things, when I actually am in a dangerous place and I'm not scared, what's going on? And I started questioning it. I started saying, well, why am I so scared when I'm at home? And then what happened is after hitchhiking, and it happened again the next year, I went off to Europe, or no, actually I was in Australia the next year, and I hitchhiked all around. I remember one night in central Australia, I was sleeping just on a tarpaulin on the ground in the middle of the desert, and I woke up and there was a whole pack of dingoes, wild dogs around me. And I was like, wah! And I made a screaming noise and they all ran away. And then you know what happened? I went back to sleep and I wasn't so afraid. And I started thinking, what is this? Because the other thing is, throughout my childhood, there was a deep part of me that thought, I'm a coward. I must be such a coward. I can't even sleep in my bedroom alone without being afraid of people harming me all the time. And yet, I questioned that when I was out in the world and realized I wasn't afraid. I also slept outside in Europe in a bunch of different countries, and I slept through the night. I didn't have these dreams. So what got me? What I finally figured out is that actually it was my parents that I was scared of. They were the ones who really actually had abused me, and they set up a dynamic where they had invaded me so many times. My dad had physically attacked me. My mom had horrible sexual boundaries. My dad had some pretty weird sexual boundaries too. There was a lot of verbal abuse coming from my dad toward me. My mom was incredibly psychologically manipulative in all sorts of ways. My parents had screaming fights. There was really a lot of disrespect going on in my home, and a lot of it crossed my boundaries, and it attacked me, and it screwed me up. I had a lot of patterns in my life of having been violated within my own family of origin. And this went all the way back to the time when I was a very, very, very little boy, even a baby, and a lot of traumatic things happened to me. The thing is, I needed my parents to love me. I needed to optimize the love that they gave me, and the easiest way to do that was never to be angry at them, never to blame them, to forgive them for everything that they did. And the easiest way to forgive them was just to block it out, to say, my parents love me, my parents are awesome, my parents are perfect, my family is perfect, I have a great relationship with my family, my parents have a great relationship with me, they have a great relationship with each other, everything's going great, wow, I've had a great childhood, etc., and to push away all the negative things and just move on, move forward, and not deal with it, not face it, not feel it, not explore it. Not really know myself all that well in this area of my life. The problem is all those bad things that happened to me, all those traumatic, overwhelming things that happened to me, it did affect me, and it really went deep inside of me. And since I couldn't put my feelings onto the people who were actually causing it to me, what I did is a very simple technique that the human mind has the ability to do. I symbolized it. I put all those feelings of terror, of fear, of anger, of sadness, of scaredness, of horror, of violation, I put it on the outside world. And since I lived on a street that, there was cars going by and people who made noise sometimes at night, it was a very simple place for me to take all those terrors that were happening inside my family and transfer them and project them out onto the bad world, the bad people, the violent people who drove by in their cars, the big, scary, mean men, stranger danger. Whereas realistically, it wasn't strangers that were so dangerous, it was the most familiar people in my life. So when I got away from my family and I was living with strangers, I was living with strange animals and strange forests and strange deserts where there was a whole different sort of danger, I actually wasn't scared, because the basic thing that was causing my terror, that was triggering me, that was reminding me of how unsafe my life was actually far away. And I realized emotionally that there was no more dangerous place for me to be in my life emotionally than in my own family home. And so this kicked forward my understanding of these nightmares when I realized, in our dreams we can project through dreams the horrible things that have happened to us onto people that actually bear no relation to the real things that happen to us. So for me, that second cure for my dream was actually different from the first one. I didn't have to confront my parents to heal it, just like I confronted my band instructor. I actually just needed to get away from them. And by getting away from them, I set a boundary in my own life. And I allowed my own life to be much, much safer, because out in the real world, you know what? People weren't always nice to me. They weren't always kind, but nobody violated me in the way that my parents did. And you know what I also found when I was out in the world hitchhiking and meeting strangers and living in foreign lands, is that by and large, 99% of the time, people were incredibly respectful of me. They treated me like a respectful human being. And I didn't get that a lot of times in my family home. So my cure for that horrible recurring nightmare that I had from probably before 9 years old. I don't even remember having it before then, but I probably did. But certainly up until I was 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, That cure was getting away from the people who had actually harmed me. So now I want to talk about my final recurring nightmare. I don't want to get into too many details because it's still very painful. It's still in my life. I still just dreamed it a few nights ago, and I've been dreaming it for a long, long time. But I've been having a dream that takes place in a certain specific place of my childhood. It was a place that my family lived for a while, and it wasn't actually my childhood home. But I've had so many, well, recurring nightmares of this specific place. And it's about violation. It's about feeling unsafe. It's about feeling lost and confused and in pain. And the reason that I bring it up is that it's a dream that I haven't solved. I haven't figured out exactly what it is. So what I want to do here, without getting into too many details because it's so personal, I just want to share a few of the clues that I've learned from those first two dreams that show how I am honing in on what this dream means. The first thing is it takes place, this dream that I have over and over again takes place in a specific place. So I think it is actually connected to that place. For some reason, it's just some gut vibe I have that something happened to me in that place. And I think it happened to me when I was very, very young. I think something bad happened to me there. And I think it happened to me probably before I really had conscious memories. Just a guess. But I don't think my family really stayed there after I was 5 or 6 years old. So it could have happened at 6, 5, 4, 3, 2 years old, 1 year old, maybe even when I was a baby. But somehow I associate that place with some sort of violation. And I think my psyche is recreating that place in a desire for me to heal. And it's bringing it back to my mind so I will look at it, so I will think about it, so I will meditate on what happened to me in that place. Because I think ultimately our dreams, our nightmares, our good dreams, our bad dreams are all signs from within us that we're trying to heal. It's our inner psyche, some disconnected part of us that loves us so much, that's trying to give us clues to help us heal. And so what I do, I journal about it. I journal about my feelings around this dream. I journal about my memories of that place. I may at some point even actually go back there and see what comes up for me. It's kind of scary, but just go and stand there. Stand on the edge of it. See what comes up for me. Free associate, because I would like to heal this dream. And not just actually to heal the dream itself, but more importantly, to heal the trauma or traumas that I believe is motivating me to have this recurring dream in the first place.